lovelies! I'm Ginny O, the author with no last name, and I'm also a dev editor, fashion designer, and a game dev. And today I want to go over Johan S's article on Games Industry Biz titled How to Get the Most Out of Your Community and Embrace Its Ideas. Is it any good? Is it actually applicable to making a game? I'm not going to go over this in reference to Star Stable, as in, is Johan applying his own advice to SSO? Because that feels a bit personal, and I've been trying my best to keep this professional. I want to take the approach of all the authors, my rules for writing, and evaluate it in that format instead. Quick note, I have never made any rules for writing because I'm not Card or Gaiman or Sanderson. Let's hop right to the meat of the story. Number 1. Listen to all your players' segments, not just your new players or veterans. He goes on to explain, as your community grows, it will form into 3 segments and then describes only 2. But he goes on to say you will need to regularly release updates or new content to cater to each of these segments' needs. This is good advice. Let's ignore his last paragraph because it's backwards. I've gone over the 3 player segments in the life cycle of an MMORPG player video last month. You have new players who want shiny new things that look good and are stunning to entice them to buy the game. You have players in the middle of the game who are going to want new content, and then you've got old and lapsed players who are going to not only want new content, which is story, they're going to want new gameplay mechanics and systems and expanded PvP content. But this ignores you also need to add new game systems and content that caters to different player types. You have story players, explorer and achievement players, crafting and collector players, PvP players, social players. The only type of player you don't really want to cater to are the griefer players who consistently try to break your game. No, you hire those to ferret out bugs and exploits. So while advice is good, it might not actually address the types of content you need to put into the game to satisfy all the different types of players in their life cycle journeys. And the new player is going to want to see that the company cares enough about the game to keep expanding the game so they can play in this world longer with systems and mechanics and story that's not completely grind. Save your grind for the players who enjoy crafting things. But even then, you can vary up those systems. This is especially important in a live service game to juggle your updates and make them large enough to appeal to all 3 life stages and to all the types of players. If you do events in your story, then new players need tutorials. If there is old story, older players will want to see it expounded upon or finished up in a coherent way. And if it is a collection type of event where you get gear, they're going to want to see new sets of gear and new recipes and so on. Once again, I feel he has this backwards. He doesn't think the right balance is always easy to find. As someone who is a planner and sits down and tries to figure out what type of updates will appeal to different players, make a schedule. Rotate up what the different player types will want, stick to the schedule. Then you can keep a coherent audience. Your audience is always going to fragment depending on player life cycle and player type. It is your job as a game developer to cater to all of your markets, if not equally, as much as possible. There are only going to be so many achievements and trophies you can put in the game. So leaderboards for achievement people that are reset often are a good thought to keep achievers interested, or adding in new items for collectors, etc. Just beware how much of this collecting ends up being grind, because collection grind is the easiest grind to put into a game. So, good advice. Needs to be fleshed out a bit. Number 2 is balance active player feedback with concrete data. On the surface, this is good advice. You need to both listen to your players and paying attention to what is going on inside the game. Like if you have dead zones, finding ways to intrigue players to turn dead zones into live zones. He doesn't actually go over this very well. In order to cater to the players of your game, you need to know what they're doing inside your game. Are they role-playing? Do they want weddings? Are they map exploring? Will putting 100% map explored with Fog of War be a good achievement? Are they forming clubs to do raids or PvP? Or in Star Stable's case, are they doing clubs for dressage, show jumping, trail rides, rodeo? And if so, how do you create facilities and systems in the game so the players can have more control, more options, and be able to create something of their own in the game and compete against other clubs? Your game may have players drowning you with requests, and you need to balance those requests versus what you see them doing or not doing in the game. So yes, watch your hotspots. Sit in on player chats to see what they're advertising and how many of them are taken up on it. Go to YouTube and TikTok and see what the players are posting as gameplay on these channels. And concrete data can also come from companies that study how players play games and what features and mechanics and systems they want in the game. So you can look at those and see how they apply to your player market. Good idea. Needed to be fleshed out more. Number 3 is reach your community where they are. What he means by this is have social media communication channels open where your players are expected to be. If that's Instagram, Twitter, Discord, YouTube, having a customer service on your site, having game masters and game chat systems, and even having a report function in the game can all help you communicate with your players. It's making sure you're putting up everything you do PR-wise across all communications channels, making sure your news is in your game launcher or on Steam where it's visible to players rather just on social media. Putting news game pop-ups in the game itself can also be helpful. And if your target audience is young enough, yes, doing videos with personalities to convey your news is actually a great way to connect with the fans. This is the bailiwick of public relations, customer service, and your chief marketing officer in the form of advertisements and making sure you get the best type of contract with whoever you're partnering with to promote your game, be it a multi-million-dollar media or clothing company or a YouTuber. This is going to depend on your game's market. Different age groups go to different social media channels. Instagram is really for the young adult audience. TikTok is also good for younger audience. Twitter is where the industry is. So a lot of older players will go to Twitter, as well as Reddit. Facebook is dying. Tumblr, don't bother. Also, it's really important to have a website that is easy to navigate and has all the information the players and parents could want and all the press releases and media put into one place, whether it's good or bad. This way players can find the TOS and the rating of your game and any hardware and software specs fast. Like Steam is really good for this because I can scroll to the bottom of the game's entry and find the hardware stuff right there. I can see game reviews and news and community discussions. Give Steam props for their website setup for these games. Number 4 is embrace ideas generated by your community. Okay, right off the bat, I'm going to call this a double-edged sword. Having a thriving community with a lot of ideas is a good thing. And as game designers and devs, you need to be willing to embrace ideas and also have a certain distance from things like fanfiction and fan art. Not only because of copyright reasons, because you need to keep your vision in mind. I always say, take your initial idea, or your edited idea, of your game's core theme and the visual aesthetic and any goals you have for the game, make it into a poster and put it somewhere visible. Players are going to have a great many ideas for your game. Those ideas may not fit with your vision of the game, and to add them into the game will just muddy up the brand. There is a saying, too many cooks spoil the broth, or too many cooks in the kitchen. Having too many ideas can take what is a really good game and turn it into a bland everything but the kitchen sink type of game. When you're looking at ideas for your game, if they come from your players, you need to evaluate them in the, does this fit our game? Does it make sense? Would it be better for a different concept? And on the other hand, the way Johan describes this is doing the market research backwards. I can understand when Star Stable came out, there wasn't a lot of market research available to go, this is what players want in a game with horses in it. And Star Stable itself has generated a wealth of market research and ideas to basically show other game developers what players want in a game with horses. Before you even begin to create your game in Unreal or whatever engine you choose, you should be getting a pile of market research on your target audience to know what they want in a game so you can make your game to suit their needs. Even back in the early 2000s, there were agencies like the Girls Intelligence Agency or doing what Mattel did and putting 3,000 girls in a stadium and going, "What do you want in a game?" as options for market research of how to make your game, not how to sell your game. I strongly recommend going to quanticfoundry.com and looking into all of their research. And there are research companies being formed for how to make your game more accessible too. His examples of Western area, which wasn't really what the players wanted. They wanted a real Mesa Valley or Badlands style or even Sahara style area. They wanted Red Dead Redemption 2, not a dude ranch. And a free horse. Every player is going to want a free thing occasionally, aren't really great examples. So examples of him doing his market research backwards. So good advice if you put it in the right order. Number 5, be transparent, honest, and sensitive to where your players need help. He says you should treat your community with the utmost love and respect. If any of you who follow me are laughing hysterically right now, I don't blame you. He goes on to say, honesty and transparency goes a long way when it comes to explaining what you're doing, why you are doing it, and what you are hoping to achieve. Part of that is also acknowledging when things go wrong and what you are doing to fix it. It's also key to show patience if some of the less technologically savvy of your players need help to get up and running, as might be the case if you cater to younger or casual gamers. It's always good to err on the over-communicating when it comes to the scheduled frequency or details of new releases because it can help to set expectations amongst fans. Contain yourselves, my lovelies. This is actually really good advice. I wish Star Stable actually followed it. The gaming industry has become a lot more transparent, especially with the rise of mega games and flourishing indie games. So first off, make sure there are real people behind your customer service and they are reading the emails in their entirety. If you have a fact page, go over common problems that players may have. Embrace the players giving you bug reports. If players bring exploits to your attention, don't ban them. Hire them. Learning to accept negative feedback is one of those things you're going to have to deal with. And for the love of little green apples, don't always blame your players. Code is fussy, and it's very easy to break something. Hacking exists. Game bugs exist. Check timestamps. Check IPs. You might lose a few crumbs of money here and there, but losing a few crumbs is better than losing the entire cookie of money. You're going to get a lot of feedback that's very subjective and it's very generic. I'm bored. It's ugly. There's nothing to do. I don't like the system. And a lot of times because they're not hardcore players or they don't know how to give constructive feedback, they can't articulate why they are bored or why they think the horse is ugly. You're going to have to learn to translate the feedback and sort out what is personal opinion versus what is artistically valid. So if you're asking for feedback, be prepared to get negative feedback. Be prepared to get the type of feedback that might take hours to implement. So if you're doing behind the scenes or doing any type of showing off of your work, then you need to do it far enough in advance to be able to fix it before implementing it into the game. Don't worry about making things such a big damn secret. People may steal our ideas. So what? They're ideas. There are 101 ways to implement a big idea. Give roadmaps. Show concept art. Show things in progress. Players are hungry to see behind the curtain of how their favorite game is made and what is happening right now in the game design process. This is free content to your channels. If your game devs don't want to be in the videos doing their work, then just show off the work and not their faces. Have roadmaps. Be honest if those roadmaps change. Be aware of your written language in your update and patch releases. It's easy to overhype something. It's much better to underpromise and overdeliver. And if you have tech stuff going on or bug fix lists, share them. Let people know stuff is happening, even if they can't see it in the game. It doesn't mean you have to keep secrets. You can simply be realistic about your time frames. If you show you care about your game and your customers by communicating and actually being helpful, your customers will care about you and will give you a lot more grace when things go wrong. As you know, they invariably do. Welcome to the table, Sergeant Murphy. Number 6 is monitor and quickly address bad behavior. He says, have a constructive strategy and then consistently address the problem when people are disrespectful, aggressive, or threatening to other players. It is critical to let your community know what is acceptable behavior and remind them about your community rules and values. Apart from it being the right thing to do, a bad situation can fester and blow up, leading to larger problems that affect the entire business. Also, provide as many options as possible to report or discuss toxic behavior. Yes, this is good advice. The more visible systems you have in place, the more likely it is to keep toxic behavior from happening. Like Wizards 101 has a emote-based chat for younger players, and then for older players in their chat, a word that you can't use turns red, and you can't hit enter to display the chat. And I'm sure the chat is sanitized of all HTML codes. Having a well-coded system or an AI doing autobans doesn't stand in for actual human eyes on the chat system. Drama is going to also flare up on your social media channels in the community itself. There should be a social media action plan in place that punishes those who do personal attacks on other players. I would say don't allow the phrases of be grateful or go play another game. Those are very negative and toxic to your community. Finding the right tone for customer service to not feed whatever drama is happening is difficult. Man, is it difficult. You don't want to be too passive, and at the same time, you don't want to be too aggressive. Emoticons and chat speak leads to very casual and patronizing tone. Avoid it at all costs. You're likely to have less toxicity and drama in your community about the game updates itself if you are following number 5 and actually being open, honest, and transparent. There are just going to be some things you're going to have to be a gray wall and ignore. And your game masters should not be game developers in your game, but actual employees hired to be your public relations, customer service type of employees, monitoring your public chat service. The same for your ambassadors. If they are doing any type of public relations or customer service, they should be paid. People running and modding a Discord, paid. Good advice. Number 7 is the people behind your game should reflect the people who play your game. Well, if this was the case, I'd hope SSO was more like 75 to 90% female rather than just 54% female, with more women in decision-making roles, including, oh dear, the CEO. But hey, you do you. And I have no idea the racial phenotypes working at SSO, so I'm not even going to go there. What Johan means is the people who are making the game should hopefully represent the demographic and gender and races of the people who play your game. We could do with more diversity in the game development space. Yes, in the AAA space. Oh my god, I'm sounding like James Stephanie Sterling. This is really hard to do because of the game development culture many of these companies have created and fostered in their offices. The patronizing way Blizzard talked about the first female employee they had is cringeworthy. I've seen testimonials of female and intersex and even BIPOC employees going, I went for an interview and was discouraged from taking the job because I wouldn't fit in with their company culture. Meaning it was a frat boy culture rife with sexual harassment and racist talk, and who needs that in their lives? No one. This is an idealistic piece of advice, in as much as Beck and I dream about a studio that's primarily female, transgender, and intersex with lots of BIPOC and LGBT plus developers. It's one of those, do you want to face a discrimination lawsuit if you don't hire the white guy? I mean, that is literally not how discrimination works, but they will do their best to twist it. And it's not a good idea to hire someone to fill a quota either. I really do wish more female and BIPOC developers would band together to form more indie studios just to see what types of games would come out of it. What ideas do they have that are being ignored by the AAA space, and how do they treat their own cultures and identities in an interactive narrative format? Versus some of the very disgusting things I've seen. Honestly, the people behind your game should be treated with dignity and respect, given proper wages with proper benefits and good amounts of vacation time without crunch or excessive amounts of overtime. Your business is a business, it's not a family or a social club. Your employees are adults who deserve empathy and respect. Treat them that way. If someone is consistently late, then find out why. Is it school? Is it childcare? Is it public transportation? Then work with them to go, okay, you could be 15 minutes later. This is when your day starts. Especially if you are doing salaries over hourly wages. As long as they are there doing their work, creating a culture of fear that they have to be there at a certain time gains you nothing but employees who leave your company as fast as possible. Of course, my dad was always the last one into work, so if you came in after my dad, you were late. But even then, no one really tracked it. Of course, we had employees who had keys to the building and came in at 5 a.m. right then. Overall, this is a solid set of advice. The spirit behind the advice is very good. There isn't a lot of practical application in this article and a bit too much of what we do at Star Stable. I mean, one double-edged sword and one idealistic piece of advice out of 7. Not bad. So here is kind of my takeaway. You need to be strong enough in your own ideas, concept, and core value of your game to be able to take what your community gives you and decide whether or not it works for your game. Having a good public relationship with your player base is also important. They want to see what they're saying is being heard and you are actually listening. It's so tempting to put in a zinger here. Even if you don't end up implementing their idea into the game, find a balance between communicating and oversharing versus not sharing at all. Hopefully, I offered some more practical suggestions and places to go and expanded on Johan's article. Next week is supposed to be Horse Family Simulator 3D and Asset Flipped games. Take care of yourselves, my lovelies. Bless, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.